In order to achieve what I'm going to explain in this video, everything that's outlined first is something that requires one other element, which is a huge factor, and it's something that I haven't really talked about, but is explained partly in my permanent ecstasy video. But if I could sum up what that factor is, it's mind, body, spirit. And body is a good diet and recuperation, which is explained in my permanent ecstasy video. It's mental health, which is, in short, again, a whole nother video needs to be made for that, but it's not being mentally affected by anything in reality, being unmoved as much as humanly possible by everything in reality, unless that is then being affected by your physical body. If your physical body is the issue, then that's another factor. You need to work back on the physical body, but your mental is hugely affected by your physical body, such as gut microbiome and so on and so forth. So working on physical body and then not being mentally affected by anything in reality, getting that mental health extremely stable and calm. And then there's spirit, which is mind, body, spirit. Spirit being tribe, community, purpose, creating essentially positivity in your life through purpose, through life actions and community. So that's mind, body, spirit, which really needs a whole nother video. I haven't really taken the time to make a video on it because I spend so much of my life learning about mind, body, spirit. I really wanted to talk on other topics. And the topic I want to talk today is about the easiest way to make life as enjoyable and peaceful as humanly possible for everybody. This is generalized so that everyone can achieve this, because you might be thinking, how does permanent ecstasy tie into this video? Permanent ecstasy is a completely different goal. Permanent ecstasy would be the ultimate goal. It'd be kind of an advanced goal, but it'd also be a very unrealistic goal for most people. The permanent ecstasy video is a goal, an outline, a set of instructions of how to achieve permanent ecstasy, which requires basically most people to either have their own business and have a lot of flexibility around the way they structure what I've outlined in the video, the very rigid regimen with their life, with their business, with their job. If they work an actual job for an employer, then it's going to be even harder, and they're going to have to do things like annual leave and so on and so forth. So that video is very, very difficult to achieve, more of an advanced level, or more for people who have the ability to do that, to execute that type of plan. Very rigid routine. But what I'm going to explain here is much more generic, much more universal for most people, and that is relationships. So relationships are the best and worst things that will ever happen to you. So think about that for a second. Most people I say that to, it's revelationary for them to realize that family, friends, work, any relationship that they have with a spouse, every single relationship that you have will be the best and worst things that will ever happen to you. When you start to digest that and metabolize what really and how broad and also how powerful that is, knowing that and having the ability to control that, you then can start to comprehend what this whole video is about. The way to create the most easiest, most enjoyable, peaceful life for everybody is to set yourself up in a situation where you have nobody that is affecting you in a negative way that you're stuck with. Okay, so again, like I said before, if anything I don't say in this video isn't encompassed, then that would then tie back to mind, body, spirit. So essentially, if you nail mind, body, spirit, and you get that, or at least get that to the best of your ability, down pat, that will cover everything that I don't mention in this video. So like I said, it's a combination of two factors: mind, body, spirit, and relationships. So the way to get these relationships correct is that you have to make sure you're never stuck with anyone that really affects you. And that means a lot, and that's very broad. So if you end up dating someone, this is a huge situation. It's a huge investment. You could be setting yourself up with someone that you think you love, someone that you could be great, that could be someone you're with forever, that could cause a lot of problems, a lot of pain, or could compound on your negative habitual problems that you already have, and they make them worse and worse and worse and worse. Not to say it's a bad relationship, just to say that they might not compliment you. Or you might be like, oh, I'm going to get the right person, they're going to compliment me, but then you don't grow. Or whatever it is. My point is, this is a situation where you're locked in. My uncle, who's into all the same stuff, is very similar to me, said to me, one piece of advice I can give you is don't do anything that's permanent. And that's a very key, powerful, universal lesson that will go through eternity, will always be valid. Because if you make the decision to choose to do something that is permanent, that will affect your entire life. And the way that can be used is such a powerful lesson. And it's the same thing here. If you date someone, right, this could be permanent. And so if you get the wrong job and you're stuck with someone who's being really mean to you at work, that's going to really affect you. If you have a problem with family and you're stuck with people at family who's going to really affect you, that's going to be a big problem. If you have friends and they really affect you, that's going to be a really big problem. And so essentially, by being very meticulous and choosing very specific friends, making a very meticulous plan around your family so that you're only around the ones that build you up, or you're only having the type of conversations with them that does build you up, right? You can start to see how meticulous this needs to be. And then with work, choosing your whole career based around the people that are nice to you, that build you up. And so this might sound quite simple at first, but if you were to structure your entire life around this to the point where you literally never are around people that ever bring you down and only bring you up, you're going to set yourself up for success. There are studies and statistics which show if you're around someone who gets divorced, you have an 80% chance of getting divorced. There's also factors, biological factors, not just psychological factors, which literally control your entire life. Someone is doing something, and the fact that they're doing it is literally making you do something along the lines of what they're doing psychologically. It's also biological statistics. This is so impactful, it's beyond comprehension. It is so many different factors apply to it. So not only is it psychologically, biologically, if someone is stressed, they leach cortisol and you absorb that cortisol, your cortisol levels increase. So if they're stressed, whether you know it or not, biologically you're stressed. If you're a man and you date a woman, biologically, without you knowing, if you're in a monogamous relationship, it's just you and her, or you hang out with her and her girlfriends often, you are literally biologically increasing in female hormones. If you have a child, as a man, you increase prolactin. So for a female, this is really ideal. For a female who wants to be ambitious, not ideal. For a man who wants to be more manly, not ideal. So biologically and psychologically and more, and on so many levels, all statistically shown that there's concrete evidence. This is so powerful if you are very meticulous about how you do it. So the way you set your life, if you were to set your life up in a situation where you have literally no one that brings you down, the next key aspect is then to implement time alone that is only spent in nature. Now, we can go into a whole nother conversation of statistics, frequency, how nature and everything affects you, but I'm sure there's many videos out there where you've learned it. Nature has a certain frequency. Nature emits large amounts of oxygen. Most oxygen comes from the ocean, but the ocean releases a lot of serotonin, and serotonin will actually can make you chilled in a way which may not be as good as going into the bush, going into a rainforest, going into the Amazon. something like that could be better, and probably ideally is better in comparison to higher amounts of serotonin. Going into the bush and getting in the soil and doing it if you have mud baths or a water hole, increasing GABA, specifically the soil, the ground. GABA and the different hormones that you release in the bush is much more beneficial than, or ideal for this, what I'm going to recommend, than going to the ocean. But the ocean is still just as good. The ocean has high levels of oxygen, so there's many benefits there. But the main point that I would recommend doing this for is for the relaxation. And so when you spend time by yourself, make sure it's never in a building. It's always somewhere that's quiet, that has a lot of nature. And so what you're doing here is you're creating positive feedback loops. Now, everywhere you go at work, family, friends, it's all people that build you up psychologically, emotionally. You are literally improving without you knowing, without even trying. On top of the fact that you might want to double down on that and try to create positive conversations with these people and build each other up. But without you knowing, biologically and psychologically, you are statistically improving without you even trying. And then on top of that, on your time alone, you're making sure it's never spent inside a building. You're making sure that it's spent always in a quiet environment outside. And what that does is it instantly puts you into a trance. And so now, without you knowing, again, psychologically, biologically, you are doubling down. And they sound so simple. This compared to other videos I've made, I feel like this advice sounds so simple and basic. But if people were to take the effort to structure their life that way, the power would be compounding every year that they have executed the entire plan exponentially. And so by spending time in nature, you've created a positive feedback loop. And now your mind is constantly thinking in positive. Spending time alone starts to become, over time, it won't happen straight away. It will happen straight away in the sense that, wow, I didn't realize that if I keep going out in nature, I feel so relaxed. I can sit here all day without going on my phone. But on top of that, over a year or 6 months to a year, when your brain will start to develop a habitual behavior of bliss now when you're alone. And so now when you think of being alone, you think of bliss. Your mind, just the thought of it, just as you're driving there to get in nature, you start to, oh, wow, I feel really good. And so this is just positive programming. And for me, this is something that I've always had. I had a troubled home, so getting away from home and sitting in a park, I would instantly release dopamine, just because that was the place that I found peace. That was my sanctuary. And so it has two things happening there. You got the nature and you got the peace, and then you combined those relationships with that, and then the next thing you want to add from here is a powerful tribe. And so most people go, but I've got good friends. This video is a lot about action. It's not a lot about understanding. It's a lot about action. If you can execute this plan, then the next step is to execute a tribe. And it's not the friends you got, at least for 90% of people. 90% of people, probably 90% of the people say I am in that 10% that isn't in that situation, but 90% of people aren't in that situation. You don't have friends that are building you up. And even if you think you do, if you went out and specifically chose people that you think would build you up, that'd be an even better group than the group you got. And in fact, if you said I've already done this, I've already did exactly what you said, Sasha. I actually went around specifically and chose my own friends because my last group of friends are crap. Even if you did actually do that, it'd still be better to do it again in 5 years' time, right? And let's say you've had those friends for 5 years now already. If you were to do it again now, you'd build even better friends. So obviously the ideal situation would be to do this properly and then to build on those friends. But even if you reckon you have that already, trust me, you don't. You need to actually move away from those friends. Still be friends with them if you have to, but distance yourself. Start a new group. Go out and find friends who are exactly the type of people you think would build you up. And because you got that in your mind, you got that in your focus, it's in your lens. If you know anything about business and entrepreneurship and the things they talk about when people are trying to create goals, trying to create businesses, when you got it in your lens, you find exactly that. Go out there and find specific people that match that exactly. Be scrutinizing. Then when you find them, build each other up to the degree where it's not just positive conversations. You're actually at a point where you can walk into their house at any time and get some food out of the fridge. And they can walk into your house any time and get food out of the fridge. You're that close that you've got a family, a tribe, relationship amongst this group of people. Now, if you're a girl, it's different advice. What I recommend for men. For men, I recommend men to have a couple of guys that they're really close with, and then to have female friends that are outside of the group. If you have relationships with a woman or whatever it is, I've got advice on relationships on another video, which I recommend definitely watching. But relationships with women, a whole nother conversation. But I would recommend having these relationships with these women not connected to this group of men. If you're a woman, I recommend something very similar. I recommend having your own group of girls, and I recommend, I'd have to go into another conversation about for women, but it would relate to syncing your menstrual cycle with these women and building a family relationship with them. That would be the entire video if I had to sum it up. 3 factors. 1, never be around anyone that really, really bothers you. Never get stuck with them. And the reason I say that is because you're going to experience negativity everywhere you go, and you're going to use that to build and grow. There's going to be lots of room and time to experience that negativity and grow from it to the point where you are no longer affected and you've completed the mind, body, spirit aspect. But making sure you're meticulous so that you're never stuck with any of these people at work, family, or home, which sounds simple at first, but most people just deal with it. You know, they say that's of course, that's simple advice, Sasha, but they just deal with it every day at family, at work. And if they knew how much that affected them psychologically and biologically. And then the next aspect, time alone in nature, continuously doing that, building the positive feedback loop. Maybe something you do already, but if you make sure your time is spent only doing that, you're building a positive feedback loop continuously. And then last of all, and make sure that time is alone, not with anyone. And last of all, time spent with friends where you're like family. And if possible, making sure the only time you actually catch up with these friends is when you're doing something really, really positive. And most people say, I just want to catch up with a friend. If you just want to catch up with a friend, have one friend that you do that with. But with the other friends, make sure you build up a positive relationship. So I'll leave it there, and all the best.